On the 19th episode of the Camp Owners Podcast, Howie and I sit down with Jack Schott of Camp Stomping Ground. We cannot wait for you to listen to this episode. It was so inspiring for us to hear Jack's story about how they developed Camp Stomping Ground, their mission of building radical empathy in their campers, how we can provide that for our community this summer and encourage that growth, and also how what's best for our campers can also be what's best for our business. We think radical empathy is a great example of that. So we hope you enjoy this episode, and we can't wait for you to hear more. Hello.
Hey, Howie.
Hey, Jack, what's going on?
Thanks
Howie,
for having me.
I'm dying at your name on your Zoom screen. That gave me the best giggle.
Oh, I gotta change that. That was.
I'm with that though. I
had a leadership team meeting last night, so I thought I would. That was my name last night.
No, I loved it. At first, I was like, "Is that Howie or Jack? Who's coming in with it? Need any haircut?"
Well,
Jack, how are you?
I'm doing great, and I also need a haircut, so I can change my name to that too.
So, Jack, where are you calling in from? Where are you? Where's headquarters?
In Saratoga Springs, New York.
Nice.
So we just acquired a property about 15 minutes from where I am, and
Right.
we don't have any water or heat or anything going on there. So here I am. We have water during the summer, but not.
Right. I gotcha.
Okay.
Well,
what
it's so tragic what's happening in Texas. I've been following that.
Yeah, our board chair actually is in Texas right now. She moved there for 2 months because her brother just had or her brother's wife just had a baby. But and so she can work remotely. She was like, I'll just go spend a couple months, and no, that's not the time you want to be in Texas right now.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Well, I can tell you that all of us in Ontario are very excited about the news in New York about overnight camps, and just being so close to New York. I'm quite involved in the political lobbying up here for our government. So we're definitely going to be channeling this news to, if they're doing it, why can't we kind of stuff. Like, just give us the green light to get to plan and to do stuff, and we'll follow the guidance. Just let us go.
Yeah, it's not, of course, anything can change, all
Sure.
of the caveats, and to hear from the governor's mouth, you're going to be able to reopen.
Right.
That's enough for us to really be able to get in high gear. And I talked to Dan Weir, who's the president of the New York State Camp Directors Association, which is our lobbying group, and they were doing some pretty serious. They did a lot of work. I can only imagine what you've been up to try and get things moving.
Yeah, it's so challenging for sure. Kelly, how are you?
I'm good. So, Jack, did you acquire a new camp property or an office property?
No, a new camp property.
So, are you moving Camp Stomping Grounds to somewhere else?
Yeah. So yes. So Camp Stomping Ground has existed in 2 rented facilities in the past. One in New Jersey for 1 week, our first summer in 2015, and then we moved to a Girl Scout camp outside of Binghamton, New York, which is about maybe 2 hours from here. and we were there for 4 years, and then in March of 2020 we acquired
I
a
remember that.
property
Yeah.
in Saratoga, and we were planning on running camp there
Got it.
last summer. And
So how far is Saratoga Springs from Buffalo?
it's about 5 hours or four and
Yeah.
a half hours ish. My parents live in Buffalo, so they've been up a whole bunch to camp, and it's about 4.5 hours from Buffalo, about 3-ish from New York City, same from
So
Boston.
I have a very interesting Camp Walden. I'm a co-owner of Camp Walden, our overnight camp. I have a Saratoga Springs early Camp Walden story. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary. My wife and I and our partners have owned Camp Walden for just over 15 years now. But is Saratoga Springs also a place where there was a music festival and there's a racetrack and all
Yep.
this kind of stuff, right? Okay, so I think I have the story right. So the founder of Camp Walden, just let me digress for a couple minutes. This is good storytelling. Is a guy by the name of Ted Cole. He named it Camp Walden because he essentially looked like Henry David Thoreau, and he looked like Abe Lincoln, and he was a folk singer. His claim to fame, and he's since passed away like 4 years after he sold us the camp. He went to school with my father-in-law. He's a legend in Ontario camping. But when he was growing up, he would often, in school with my father-in-law, he would say that my father-in-law was the prefect and he was the defect. And that was sort of the line that Ted would use. And Ted was a wonderful man. And his family owned Canada's largest bookstore called Cole's Bookstore. So the phrase Cole's Notes in Canada, like whatever the equivalent in the States would be for all these books, that's his family. So he owns Camp Walden in the first 3 years, and it's like this hippy dippy place. He's going to bring kids there. And it was the time where you didn't need a passport to go over the border. So he thought it would be cool to take his campers and his staff on a weekend trip to Saratoga Springs to a music festival, because he was a folk singer at the time. The stories I heard at the 50th anniversary of what went on with 15 and 16-year-olds in Saratoga Springs, with them smoking and gambling and betting on the horses. It's like these people like said to me, like, if you knew what went on at Camp Walden in 1971, 72, and 73, you would like, your camp would have been shut down. Like, it's just as simple as that. So that's when I hear Saratoga Springs, I just wanted to make sure like that's the story that comes to mind from my camp.
Yeah, that sounds like Saratoga, but yeah, that's a pretty wild. I cannot imagine what it was like to run camp in the days before there were real rules for what happened for all of us.
Real rules.
And parents really cared about what happened to their kids when they went to camp. Yeah, sort of interesting. Anyhow,
I love that.
That's my.
And are you at Walden most of the summer, or are you mostly at Robin Hood?
Yeah, Sari and I operate Robin Hood full time, and we spend our weekends up at Walden in the summer, and work closely with our partner, and he's the full-time director. It's about a 2 hours and 45-minute drive from Robin Hood, so we do that every weekend in the summer and help out. It's been a beautiful kind of transition from day camp to overnight camp. So many of our staff and campers started with Sari and I when they were 4 and 5, and end up at Walden, sort of like how the business plan sort of all played out. So like it all sort of moved in the direction we were hoping for. So it's good.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, pretty
Jack,
cool.
how many weeks of camp are you planning to do this summer?
8 weeks and 2-week sessions. So we used to run 1-week sessions we ran 1-week sessions since 2015 when we started, and we moved to 2-week sessions this year, partly because of COVID and partly because that was the direction we were hoping to go anyway. And so this was a good excuse to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Make the best of it and make those big changes while everything's changing anyway.
Right.
Absolutely. I just got off my weekly call with Eric Wittenberg. He says hello to both of you.
Oh, awesome.
I'm working with Eric these days in the camper machine and doing some fun stuff with him. We decided to take the plunge, and he's such a really bright guy.
Yeah, he's brilliant. And I talked to him, I don't know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and he was pitching the idea of the camper machine to us. And I was like, that sounds amazing, Eric. I don't think you understand how little money we have.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like, and he's since changed his product, I think, because he was pitching us like $50,000 a year to
Yeah, I
do
know.
like all this stuff. And I was like, Eric, I could hire like almost two people at the rate we're like,
Yeah.
and he was just like, but
Well, I got reconnected with Eric at ACA last year in San Diego, and he's since done the show, and it was really awesome. And I have a connection to his mom because we had connected with Bobby back in the day when she ran Elmwood Day Camp, and I was doing our thing, and we'd see each other at Tri-State. So it's kind of small world, all came together. But kind of the stars aligned. My former marketing people who did some of that work, she had to, because of COVID, move to another kind of line of work. So some of the money that we had, I couldn't do both at the same time. So it just sort of aligned and it worked out. And I asked him to be nice with the Canadian exchange and all that good stuff.
well,
So
I'm excited. Well, then I'm excited. I'll have to watch your marketing more closely to see how sign up for a few different types. Like that's his superpower. It seems like, is to be able to like really segment the marketing down to.
It's segmentation and automation. We're just going through this whole onboarding stuff. It's really, he's really making us think about how we want to communicate and who do we want to communicate to. It's been really cool so far. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Ready to do this?
Are you ready? Okay, so Jack, I know you have your own podcast, or Camp Stomping Ground has their own podcast. So I'm assuming all this is old hat to you, but just in case, I always walk people through turning off their phones, putting your do not disturb on your laptop if that's what you're using. Do you know how to do that on a Mac and PC? Good.
I don't have notifications on for anything anyway, so we're good to go.
Okay, beautiful. And I will be the official timekeeper for Howie and I. So I will start my stopwatch. And then typically what I'll do once we get down to the questions section, I'll write in there where we are for timing. So I'll put timestamp like 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 35. We usually try to get around that 45 minutes to an hour mark. So Howie and I will communicate as we get closer to that, if we're going to move on to the inspiration part or keep going. So some notes will be applicable to you, some won't. But a lot of times I just have my Zoom up top and my show notes underneath me. Again, you don't have to have them up, but just so you know, Howie and I will use them in that way.
I'm bringing them up now.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Jack, for us, I just think that the stuff that you're doing at Stomping Ground and its applicability for private camp owners to think about, the idea of like how we can tie this to good business kind of stuff, that this way of thinking is really good business regardless of what you do and stuff. And I just I think that that's sort of the angle. I hope you feel that our vision of how the conversation will go, sort of aligns itself with what you're comfortable and what you think is the right direction for the show. It's sort of, we want to do it collaboratively kind of thing.
Sounds great. I got my notes. I'm ready to go.
Amazing.
Wow. Nice.
Love it.
I love that. This is fun. I love your podcast. So I don't know that I'm qualified, but I'll do my,
come on.
I'll do my best.
Come on.
You're going to be great. You're going to be great. We're excited. Okay. I'm going to reset my little stopwatch here. And then Howie, looks like I'm starting. So are you good to go?
I am good to go.
I really wish you'd change your name back to Needs a Haircut, because that was my favorite. I love it. Oh, and Jack, I forgot to mention, if something does come up, like a dog barking or kids, or mine usually is children, we'll stop and then we will pick up where we left off. Or if you're talking and you're on mute, we can always fix things. So the producers can take or edit as needed. So don't panic if that happens. Okay, I'm gonna start my timer, put a little 5 up, and then I'll count down, and then I'll start talking. So, all right. Oh, I've been recording the whole time. Oh, well, they can chop this off. So, okay, no problem.
We didn't say anything bad about Matt. We love Matt.
Our producers are so great. Okay, all right, I'll note what time it is. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We are going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Welcome, I'm Kelly Shuna, co-owner and director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp, located in Stillwater, Minnesota.
Hi, everyone. I'm Howie Grossinger, and I am the co-owner and director of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto. If you're looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen.
We are really excited to be talking with Jack Schott of Camp Stomping Ground on our show today. Jack is an active, passionate member of the camp community. His grassroots efforts with Camp Stomping Grounds and their mission to build radical empathy in their campers is really impressive. Howie and I are excited to speak with Jack about radical empathy and how its philosophy can be applied to campers, staff, and how it is good for business and the entire camp industry. Howie, I have to tell you, when we talked about having Jack on the show, I really had a hard time reining it in. So Jack, I have to say, we talked about, should we have him talk about radical empathy? Should we have him talking about starting camps from scratch? And recently the work you're doing with racial justice is really inspiring to me. So I think we're gonna have to sign up for like a three contract deal here with you, because I'm gonna try to focus, but I just want you to know, I feel like there's so many great things that we have to talk about with our guest, Howie.
Absolutely. We'll call it like the Jack Schott trilogy. Like this could be part one. I mean, Lord of the Rings and all that good stuff. But, I'm really excited to have Jack on our show. We appreciate how much of a fan he is of the show. So it's great to have him on and chat about the things that are important to him and the things where he and his team are making a mark in the industry. So Jack, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I like you said, I'm a huge fan. I love the show. I love how you peel back the curtain and allow all the rest of us running camps to see what some of the kind of best minds, especially in kind of the business side of things, are thinking about and how that impacts how they run camp.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you so much. Jack, as part of sort of the beginning of every one of our episodes, I think our audience loves to hear sort of the origin story, of every guest in terms of their camp journey. And I'm hoping that you can share sort of how it all began for you, this journey from your camp experience to camp ownership to all the things that you are doing currently. So we really look forward to hearing the story.
Yeah, thanks. I hope that this is just the very beginning of my my camp origin story. But about 12 years ago, about 10 years ago, Laura and I hit the road, and we'd worked at Camp Salamaris in upstate New York as seasonal staff. And when we graduated from college, we didn't know what we wanted to do, and we hit the road and ended up visiting camps all over the country. We thought we'd be on the road for a couple of months, and I emailed Travis Allison this like really long email that was like, hey, blah, 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 blah. And he was just like, what you should do is, and then he outlined for us a list of go visit camps and share the awesome stuff that they're doing. And we ended up living in our Honda Civic for 2 years, and we visited 47 states and over 200 camps, and did what we're doing right now, which is just like talk to camp directors about what was awesome about their camps and hear what was going on. So again, like one of the reasons I love this podcast is it reminds me of what we were trying to do so much, but we don't have to drive so far. You can get all the best stuff without leaving your house. And so, yeah, it was amazing. We saw all these camps. We saw what was possible. We saw these amazing things. We fell in love with kind of the ability for camps to build these different little worlds for all of us to step into, whether it's day camps or sleepaway camps. I think what camps do really well is they create this experience that kids step into, and instead of kind of just preparing kids for the rest of their lives, what we do is we inspire kids to see what the world could be like if, and then each camp does it a little differently. But most of us are really focused on what would it look like if we treated each other with a little more respect, with a little more empathy. We call it radical empathy at Stomping Ground, but you know, that's what we do. We inspire kids to see what's possible if the world were a little different. And then hopefully they go out and, you know, with us as the wind at their sails, we help them to make the world a better place. That's what I really hope we're all doing in our different camps. And so we saw that, and then Scott Arizella met us at a conference, and he was like, so you're going to start your own camp? And Laura and I said, Laura, I started camp with Laura. We lived in our car together, but we said, you have to be rich to start a camp. You have to have, you know, millions of dollars and, you know, I don't know, rich family or who knows, you know, that was the mindset we had. And Scott said, no, you can start a camp. You know, you rent a camp like you rent a car, and then you convince your friends to come work for you. And the hard part is, you know, getting parents to trust you enough to send their kids off. And so we went and volunteered at his camp for kids with autism in Michigan for a week. And then he and James Davis and Sylvia Van Meerten helped us start Stomping Ground in 2015. And we were a sleepaway camp for 1 week that summer. And we've grown. And just in March, which is a terrible time to do this, we purchased a property outside of Saratoga Springs, New York, where we run sleepaway camp. And we're a little nonprofit that gets to work.
I think we could just wrap it up there. That was awesome.
So how many miles in total in this journey with Laura? Like what's the number? How big is this number?
Yeah, it's about 200,000 miles is what we drove. The Honda Civic was retired about 4 years after the beginning of the trip, but it was a great car. We took out the back seat so we could put a camp mattress in the back. And there's an old video on YouTube somewhere. It's like car cleaning for camping coast to coast or something like that, where you can see us taking the mattress out of the back. But we slept in the car. We you know, it was a pretty. I don't know that I want to do it again, but I'll tell you, it was a pretty awesome couple of years.
Well, I find the whole story from a camp ownership business kind of perspective is that we hear in all kinds of industries the extent that young entrepreneurs go to network and find out and carve out their own vision and name the industry, and it's whether it's a startup or whatever it happens to be. And I think, you know, Kelly, this is a great example that Jack is sharing with us of, like, you know, you got the dream, you've got your mentors, they're giving you some advice of what to do, and they went out and did it, and then was able to really shape their vision and using all these great resources. And I think in many ways it's a testament to the industry on how, and Jack, you know, I got the sense that from, you know, your travels with Laura, was that there was such openness to share and bring you in and answer your questions. I just think, you know, I know we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of our topic, but I'm not lost on the fact that, you know, this journey you went on is no different than the person who, you know, went door to door to try to get interest in whatever they were selling or whatever. Like, it's, every industry has its story. And I think this is an amazing story. And you got to retire a Honda Civic, and you got to get, you know, and I'm sure there's lots of great travel stories that are probably not appropriate for the episode, but we'll save those for some time later.
That's absolutely right. And I couldn't agree. Laura likes to say that we felt like every camp director's long lost cousin being passed from one camp director to the next. And everyone was so amazing, taking us in, giving us a place to stay, often taking us out to dinner, and then sharing. You know, the most valuable thing was getting to walk around camps with brilliant camp directors and have them just, nothing was filtered. You know, it was just everything that everyone was willing to share. And I haven't met a camp director since that isn't willing to do that with almost anyone. And so the advice I always give to people when they say, like, how do you start a camp, or how do you get a job in the camp industry? And I don't think you have to drive. I don't think you have to go quite as wild as we did. It was maybe the bang for the buck was not worth it after some number of camps. But you know, email the dozen camps that are within 3-4 hours of driving from wherever you are, and just ask if you can take a tour. And, you know, do 20 tours of camps, and I bet you'll have a job offer for the summer in a seasonal role of some kind, and you'll be able to. I think the more people you know, the more likely you're going to be able to be hired. You have to bet on yourself. You have to be awesome in the ways. But I think most camp people are awesome. I don't think that's the hard part.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, there's so many different sort of paths in the journey to camp directorship, ownership, whatever it looks like. And we hope to do, shows in the future, Kelly. We've talked about this, about the succession of family ownership, or it's, I want to do something brand new with my partner, or whatever it happens to be. I think Jack has, inspired us for some future episodes for sure.
Yeah. And I think it sounds amazing. I want to get in my car and go to 47 camps. And even when you're in a different stage of the process, if you've already have a camp, I think for individuals like yourself and I, Howie, it's good thought to continuing to do that, continuing to maybe every year go try to visit a camp. And like you said, Jack, whether it's an hour away or 2 hours away, to fuel that fire, and even just to see how different things are built, or they have things laid out, or there's just so many things, even the signage. I think it's something that will definitely continue to fuel that fire of camp ownership by seeing how others do it. But yeah, Jack, I just want to get in the car and spend a summer looking at other camps and walking around. That's just so inspiring and best practice. Like, what a great way to set yourself up for success, to get that best practice and just be a learner. I think that's phenomenal. I'm so excited that you shared that story. That's awesome. So again, see, we're getting derailed. There's just too many things to talk with Jack about. So I'm going to move on to our first question, Howie, so that we can get to our topic today. But Jack, we really want to hear more from you about radical empathy, and that being a cornerstone of the mission for your camp. So tell us, what is your definition of radical empathy?
Yeah, so I can't take credit for starting with radical. Laura brought radical empathy as an idea to Stomping Ground. She spends so much of her time on the phone with camp parents, with caregivers, and those kind of things, and it just kept coming up as what she was talking to them about. And so when we talk about radical empathy, we talk about how empathy is the easiest for people that are the most like you. So I'm a cis white dude from a middle class family. It's the easiest for me to empathize with people that are like that. And so that's fine. I think that level of empathy is great. But it's sort of passive. It's sort of like taking what's going on. And so when we talk about radical empathy, we talk about actively striving to take the perspectives and feel with, like Kelly, I know you love Brene Brown, to feel with the folks that are as different from us as possible. And so what we try and do at camp is bring people together so that when you're playing Gaga, when you're playing soccer, when you're throwing a pot or playing guitar, you're with people that are different from you in whatever way, racially, sexual orientation, whatever, but also just like from a different part of the state or whatever. And doing all those things that we already do at camp. So you're already like, camps are doing this. We're already good at it. Like, again, we just stole all these ideas from other camps and then just used a different word, basically. And so that allows us to build relationships with folks, that then allows us to have empathy with folks who are kind of different from us, and push ourselves. We talk about it with kids, we talk about it with staff, push ourselves to try and take the perspective of where other folks are coming from. And empathy has kind of two sides. One is cognitive empathy, the ability to kind of understand where someone's coming from. And then the second is emotional empathy, or be able to like kind of feel what they're feeling. And so kind of keeping those in mind as a part of what we do at camp, so that when kids go out into the world, again, because we're inspiring, our little microcosms are hopefully inspiring kids to reimagine the world as maybe they saw a little bit of it at camp. And we have a plenty divided world. We don't need to get into all those details, but if we have that empathy, if you've found that you can make friends and understand and feel with and understand where people are coming from at camp, when you leave, maybe you're a little bit better at that with folks that aren't as similar to you as the way that I grew up in my mostly middle-class white neighborhood.
Yeah, it feels like more than ever this intentionality around empathy, and because I did a little bit of reading on on your website about sort of how radical can be perceived as something like far out or dangerous perhaps. I mean, historically the word radical associated with different terms can mean all kinds of things. We see that in our political world. Politicians who just may have a slightly different viewpoint are now deemed radical, and it does foster this mindset for people, or when they hear it, if they're not in tune with its precise application, can get the false idea of what it is. I mean, you have this wonderful empathy and you've added radical to it, and so I guess my question to you, Jack, is as you look to creating, we're all as camp owners developing mission and philosophy and trying to communicate so that it resonates with parents who can then say, this is the place for my 10-year-old, my 9-year-old, etc. I'm curious, in the creation of Stomping Ground, you and Laura looking at how you package sort of, to the family, to the organization who's going to send their kids to Stomping Ground, how you package all that, because I'm really curious about the framing of it. And I guess associated with that, and feel free to carry on, is how do you train your staff to be the models for this? So, but we can get into that afterwards. But those are the things that come to mind in the weirdness, that the way my mind works right now.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really great question. And we like I said, we a little bit stumbled upon the idea of saying radical empathy. And, since then I've seen Barack Obama use the term radical empathy in an interview with the New York Times, and our families went wild, so excited to, we started really from more of a perspective of trying to build a camp that was focused on kind of partnering with campers, which is still a cornerstone of what we do, and giving kids freedom, which is also still a cornerstone of what we do. But we were using a lot more freedom language on our website and in our marketing. And what we saw was when kids came to camp, they were like expecting more freedom. So our first summer seemed like Scott Arizella calls it no rules camp, because there was a focus on freedom, and the program still has just as much choice. It's still, all of those things are still built into what we do, but we changed our marketing, our outward marketing, to say we are, inspiring radical empathy. And our mission is to inspire the next generation of radically empathetic decision makers. So holding on to some of that freedom piece, because I think that they go hand in hand. But what we came from is a very like Seth Godin style of marketing, where if you don't put your flag in the sand and say, this is what we care about, he says, people like us do things like this. And so when we think about it, people that care about radical empathy, about building a world where people want to spend time finding ways to build bridges as opposed to dividing them, if that's what you're into, then we might be the camp for you. And we call it radical because we were, to be honest, I couldn't compete with your camp. I don't think the camps are competing. There's plenty of kids out there, but like we needed new kids that didn't go to camp before to come to our camp. And so we needed to be a little more radical to start to bring in these folks. And it's not, I mean, if you look at the schedule of our camp, it looks like every camp, it's choice based. But it's we have lunch and dinner and we're a sleepaway camp. So, we do evening programs and that kind of stuff, but it's not that complicated. Like I looked at Andy Pritikin's schedule for Liberty Lake. It's the same schedule. You go to option 1, then you choose to go to option 2. It's the same thing. And there's some system stuff that we do a little bit differently. We really focus on restorative justice and some other stuff, but it's the same idea. But what we found is it really is what we put out to the world is what we're going to get back from parents and campers and families. So, the first example we heard about this was, Y camps are notorious for making sure that what's in the brochure is available for kids at camp, right? So if you say that kids are going to be able to go on the high ropes course, they darn well better be able to go on the high ropes course. And that's I think that's a cycle that I don't want to get into. So I'm not going to promise any activities. It's pretty hard to find out much about activities at Stomping Ground on our website because I don't care, and I don't care about them, and I don't want our families to care about them. Like I don't want them to care about, a ropes course or horses or these expensive things. One, because I can't afford them, but two, because if they come to camp expecting to have that, if that's why they chose, if you see the website and there's this awesome high ropes course on the front page of the website, or there's this awesome water park on the front page of the website, you darn well better be able to make sure that kids have a great time doing that stuff. And I don't want to promise that. I'd much rather promise that your kid will make mistakes, will, mess up, all these things. If I can promise that's easy. I can make sure that's we can all do that. And so we stumbled into this marketing. We were intentional about putting our values first. That was something we knew we wanted to do. Lots of camps do that. But we stumbled into the idea of we can't promise activities because we don't know, we were renting facilities. We weren't exactly sure what we could provide. And we couldn't afford them. So we couldn't say that you could do horseback riding, even though I like the idea of horseback riding, because we couldn't afford horses. And so then we have no families that want to come to camp for most of our activities because we don't have them. You don't know what we let people know what they are. You can play basketball and that kind of stuff, but it's not the front of the marketing. And I think that that's really important. I think that in some ways that's a superpower that we've kind of gotten by accident by not talking about activities. We don't have parents complain about activities.
Well, I also find it really interesting because I think in your explanation, you're channeling a lot of Michael Brandwine around sort of what it is camp delivers in terms of life skills and these experiences. He's, having sat like many of us in hundreds of amazing Michael Brandwine sessions. Put your hand up if you've done that. The fact is that that's a big feature of his message around what could resonate with families, and the fact that it has been so intentional for you and it's resonated so well. I think a lot of people can take stock of that in trying to see how it might work for them as well. There are a couple things that before I turn things over to Kelly for her comments, because I know she's chomping at the bit, but a couple things. Seth Godin went to camp in Ontario in Algonquin Park, overnight camp. So shout out to our friends at Camp Erewhon, because I know that's where he went. And also number two, I find it very interesting, because the use of the word freedom, because sometimes in camp marketing, the word freedom can connote sort of unstructured and can maybe not leave parents feeling so comfortable, like, oh, I thought my kid was going to camp and, there would be, they're in the woods, or they're, in rural, wherever we are, but freedom, like really freedom. And so I'm just wondering sort of your thoughts around how you use that. At least that came to mind just based on my experience when, letters from home that said, yeah, we're free at this time to do this with just our two friends, and our counselors, aren't around for like a half an hour. That, first of all, that never happens at day camp. In many ways, but at overnight camp, we know that independence is developed through opportunities for discovery and, yes, freedom. But that just stuck with me. Any thoughts on sort of the concept or the thoughts on freedom?
Yeah, so many thoughts about freedom. We I think this is another thing that we've leaned into and saw at camps. And again, none of these ideas are ours. We stole them and built on them from other people. So, Laura and I, while we were driving around the country, fell in love with these kind of like free play areas. And, day camps are awesome at this. That, a sandbox is an awesome free play area, but, there's places that leveled them up. And the place that we loved is at YMCA Camp Kitaki. They have a fort called Fort Pawnee, and it's a stockade fence around the outside, and you go inside, and the unit goes and plays and gets up to stuff. And they have some costumes and there's some sticks. They have all kinds of like loose parts to mess with. And we fell in love with it. It was like one of their activity periods. You go to Fort Pawnee, and we started seeing this at a few different places. They're building upon these ideas. And we met James Davis, who ran a little church camp in Syracuse. And James is a big time libertarian. Like he was pushing the like freedom pretty far, trying to give kids as much. He also was a professional poker player. He's a fascinating guy. But he was a camp director, and he was, really pushing freedom. So Laura and I worked for him for a little bit during the summer to see like, what the heck is going on here? And we wanted those ideas, and we were seeing camps starting to dabble into trying to give more free time to kids, but not having, being a little bit afraid, like you're saying, Howie, like, how do I explain this to parents? How do I articulate what I mean here? And we just we didn't have legacy parents to please. So when we started, we said, let's make a bet. And I think part of it too is we heard Jolly at Mid States, Jolly Corley, who was just on here, talking about the idea of like the old neighborhood and giving kids a chance to go outside and play until the streetlights came on, or work. Like, how do you play? She talked about, I remember this was 2014. She was talking about what happens when kids play football together in the neighborhood. How do they decide teams? What's that look like? And at camp, we step in long before kids would get into an argument about what the teams were for football, or whatever. Like, and she was talking about how that was a lost skill set, and we took that right in, and a lot of our marketing talks about kind of the idea of the old neighborhood. But I think that there's a big market, and we're betting our whole existence on this. So I'm biased, of course, but we're 7 years in, and it's working okay. There's a big market for parents that are my age-ish and a little bit older. I'm 32. Looking for giving their kids a chance to play in the old neighborhood in a safe way. And I think, and our parents, granted, our parents, a lot of them are kind of Big Bernie, Brooklyn, Mount Airy, Philadelphia. Like we've got some crunchy parents, don't get me wrong, but they're becoming more and more mainstream every day. And our parents are the best. We have the best parents in the world. I promise you, our parents are better than your camp's parents. I'm just kidding about that, but I love our parents. They're amazing. Parents want this stuff. They really want it. They want to give their kids a chance to play, and they want it to be safe. Like you're talking about, Howie, like our kids are never unsupervised. You can, in New York State, you're allowed to let kids walk between activities by themselves. We don't even do that, because we're pushing this idea of giving kids choice and freedom. We kind of curtail it at we make sure that there's these guide rails so we can say, listen, the kids are never unsupervised. They're going to make mistakes. It's no different from at a lot of day camps, arrival time where kids like play on the playground, or the end of the day. We just have more of that in a day. And you only choose to come to the parents only choose to send their kids to Stomping Ground, they knowing that. I don't think you could just change the program at any camp to be as like kind of choice-based as Stomping Ground without pushing marketing to back that up.
Right. So free range elements, like the whole free range movement.
Absolutely.
Kind of stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of influence on sort of this generation of parents who want to push back on a lot of, what has gotten our kids adolescents to where they are now. They're being more intentional about free range experiences, I would imagine. Kelly?
I believe you, Jack, that you have great parents, because I think it goes to that old saying of good kids come from great parents. So I believe you, because I think good parents, great parents are attracted to what you are delivering and your message. Because even me, I'm like, heck, my kids are going to New York this summer. Woo! Sign me up. But I think the other thing that really resonates with me, and particularly right now, what I'm hearing with camp is it's not about the bells and whistles during this COVID time. It's about being together, and who cares what they do? We just want to be together. And so I think that your message of, who cares about the activities? We just want kids to be together and to connect and to feel with. I wrote that down. I'm becoming the note taker. I'm like Gabs Jr. I'm going to call myself.
You,
I'm liking it.
yes.
I love Gab. So anything that I can,
As long as
emulate.
if Gabrielle Rail did not trademark that, then I'm sure she's a very generous person. I'm sure we're good.
Yeah. I'll ask her if I can follow in her amazing footsteps. But in my little learning journal, camp journal, I wrote feel with. And I think that is so important right now, Jack, is that feeling with others. And, I know when I interview staff, I tell them, when I go out to Stillwater Target, I do not have family come to me and say, oh, Kelly Shuna, your canoeing lessons are just the best. That's why we come there. It's never about that. It's about our staff. Where do you find these people? And how do you find them? So whatever that is of what you're creating, I think you are on to something so magical. Not Michael Brandwein does not like magical. Camp's not magical. It's intentional. Something so intentional that camps do is creating that world to step into. And it's not about what we have. It's about how we can make them feel and that atmosphere. So I really, really think what you're doing is so important now than ever. And I love the things that you are standing for there. I really think it's special.
I was wondering as well, Jack, in a year, and I know we're going to bounce around to a bunch of topics here, but I just, in hearing Kelly talk about the impact radical empathy has, I mean, this concept of radical empathy pre-COVID was just a part of your camp DNA. This is what you were going for before we had 16 months of kids with no social connections, a summer of racial injustice, divided politics, tribalism, and all these things. I'm wondering if you're starting to think about it, and I know the answer is yes, you're thinking about this, but I guess in terms of staff training and sort of this kind of stuff, we all don't know the kind of baggage kids are bringing to camp, day or overnight, more than ever now. And we often, and this is not new, I mean, we all talk about, the analogy, the imagery of the backpack, right? We give a backpack and we don't know what's in any individual kid's backpack. But I just feel more than ever, with our attempts to embrace diversity and inclusion and, applying radical empathy, what are you and Laura thinking about for 2021 in terms of any specific approaches or emphases on any of these things? Because I think the challenge for us as camp directors is, we got to be ready for whatever comes our way. And that includes what staff are bringing as well, given their experience. So maybe you could comment on some of that as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a wild summer from top to bottom. And I'm incredibly grateful for all the camps that were able to run in 2020, day camps, sleepaway camps, etc. In New York, sleepaway camps were not allowed to run. We likely wouldn't have felt comfortable running Stomping Ground. We had moved to a new facility. Everything was coming so late. There was lack of information. We didn't have the resources. So I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you to all the camps that were able to run. I'm sure it was incredibly challenging. I've talked to a lot of you and also heard about how, from so many, how important the summer was. On this podcast, we've heard from Andy and Steve, and we've heard from so many people who have talked about how important running last summer was for the kids that were able to come to camp. And Kelly, like you said, like nobody talked about the activities. Who cares? It didn't matter. None of it mattered. I think that none of it mattered ever, but it especially doesn't matter now. And so looking into this summer, we've now gone an extra 12 months since then of added kind of trauma, of added stress, of added isolation for kids who've been in and out of schools, who especially, the under-resourced communities have been even less resourced now than ever before. So, the rich kids are going to have had the best kind of schooling experience, the best whatever, the best ability to play with other kids and kind of not be so isolated. And our kids that are coming from under-resourced communities, especially kids of color, are going to be coming with a year that's been harder than ever before. So we all know this. None of this is new. So what can we do to set them up for the most success? And I think it's leaning more into all the things that have made camps really awesome in the past, and away from kind of top-down forcing kids to have to fit into a specific box. And that's going to be really hard. That's going to be really hard because we have, for Stomping Ground, we normally run a totally choice-based program where kids spend all day going from little group to big group to little group to big group and intermixing with everyone at camp. And almost certainly that's not going to be the case for us. It almost certainly won't. We're going to be back to kind of an old school style of there's 12 kids and 4 staff or whatever, and you spend 2 weeks together. I don't know. We don't know totally what our policies are going to be on things, but it's going to be drastically different from what we've done in the past. And so what that looks like, I think, for staff, and Laura would talk to you a lot about mental health support, and we will have, Laura just finished her MSW, we will have folks on site to do those kind of things. And that's incredibly important. And it's outside my wheelhouse of being awesome at talking about. So I'm sure you have amazing folks that can talk about the mental health of staff and how important that is. And it's unbelievably important. I think, I'm an industrial engineer by training, so I love systems. And I think that the thing we can do right now to set our staff up for the most success is to, one, hire more staff that are going to work directly with kids. That doesn't necessarily mean hiring more staff, I think, but hiring more staff that'll be in ratio. So we might normally have, a waterfront director, and people have horse barn directors and things like that. We don't have that stuff anyway, but more people that interact directly with kids as much as possible, so that we can increase our ratios to like 4 counselors for 10 kids or whatever it is. And that's hard, but there's cost savings. One, in the US, like just use your PPP money for that. And 2, stop running horses for this summer. Bring them back next summer. Stop running high ropes for this summer. Save some money there, so that you can hire more staff. And then set them up. So something we've been working on is, normally you'd sign up to go to archery, and 10 kids would go to archery, and you do archery at archery. It's the only thing you do at archery. And then you'd come back and you'd do something else. That's great because you had a choice. It's like choosing to go to a pizza shop or a Chinese food restaurant or whatever. The Chinese restaurant doesn't need to have pizza because you can just choose to go to the pizza place. It's fine. But at camp, we're the whole entity. You can't choose to do that. So how can we build choice into archery? We're not going to be, not having someone in charge of archery. Archery is dangerous. There's very specific rules at archery. That's even at Stomping Ground, where we're pushing all this freedom stuff. You stand up, you never retrieve your, all the rules, all that stuff. We want it. However, what if you get to archery with your 12 kids? You've got those 4 staff, and you've got 2 staff running the actual archery part. And then in the pavilion at archery, there's 1 staff that's helping kids do friendship bracelets or, some kind of something else. And 1 staff that's in an area that's doing fort building. So you've got actually 3 choices at archery. And maybe you're there for slightly longer. That's what we're looking at, having a slightly longer activity block, but a couple of options at the activity block. And so you can freely range from archery to friendship bracelets to fort building. And that's not exactly answering your question about how do we train staff, but it's setting our staff up to be successful, because I'm a huge brat when I have to do friendship bracelets. I just am. Don't make me do them. I hate it. I'm going to be a brat about it. Or if I'm 13 and this is what I did as a 13-year-old camper, I'm just going to flirt with whoever's around and ruin their experience. So that's not good. Nobody's happy there. And Laura and I laugh about this because, like, don't make Laura go to soccer. She'll just sit and pick dandelions and piss me off because I'm trying to play, and so, like, that, how do we set our staff up to let kids be happy so that it's easier for staff? Because when staff are happy, kids are happy. When kids are happy, staff are happy. It's a cycle. And so how do we set them up for success? I think we build these kind of structures to start, and then we do all the other stuff too to support them in terms of, you'll have awesome people on this that'll be much better about talking about, like guardian angels. I've heard Beth Allison and Gabs talk about, setting. There's all kinds of those ideas that are really important. And this summer we have free range a little bit to change stuff. Nobody cares what our schedule is this summer. And parents are just like, just take my darn kid. Like, they need camp. And then we can change camp to be the best possible experience with more leeway, I think, than ever before.
Yeah, you speak to exactly what we are working through right now, is how do we give kids choice that we've done such a great job of. Their whole afternoon is typically choice. How do we give them choice in such a cohort experience? So how do we make them still feel like they are making those choices? Because I agree with Jack, we get the best out of them when they have some onus in what they're doing. But how do you do that in such a controlled cohort group that doesn't mix? So I think you're speaking to, at least for me, I don't know about you, Howie, but that is on the forefront of my mind about how we do that this summer.
Well, I've been, Jack knew how to get straight to your heart, Kelly, by mentioning Brene Brown earlier. I knew that was really sucking up to the co-host stuff there. But I've been on a bit of a binge with the merging of the Brene Brown, Adam Grant world. If you follow Adam Grant and organizational behavior, and I recommend Think Again and all his stuff, but that's the whole thing, is that rethinking is the stuff that, Jack is, spoken at a different level. It's like, start to think like a scientist, right? Test hypotheses about how this might work. One of the lines that a recent podcast on Dare to Lead, Brene Brown hosted Adam Grant, they got into some really great stuff that's related to this. And of course, radical empathy, Brene Brown, all this, like, it's all in the wheelhouse where all these worlds are coming together. But, Jack, describing this, this restructuring or this reimagining of what activity blocks look like, I thought of the quote that came out of the podcast, which I encourage people to listen to, is, it takes courage to pivot. It's easier to protect. And I think we're in this mode for 2021 where we're all, and we know the word pivot is, largely overused. I get that. I'm guilty. But the problem is that this is all about the courage to reimagine and rethink things. And then the other thing that I just thought of related to this whole course of the discussion is meeting with our teams, and just as you are and I am and Kelly is this message of, I'm not here to be right, I'm here to get it right. This idea of when, I'm sure in all of our camps, we're having these, I'll use the word battles, but differing of opinion on, this is the way we need to turn, this activity to this, and this is how we should staff it. And, we got to take, we can't have 6 arts and crafts, staff stationed. We've got to maybe immerse them within the cohort so we can contact, like, we're all thinking of the same thing. I know we are. Day camp, sleepaway, it doesn't matter. But the point is that this idea, and I want to connect it so that maybe I can get a B+ at least in radical empathy, is the fact that we have to, in those exercises, Jack, I'm imagining radical empathy has an incredible place within the planning of our summer, right? Given the fact that we are so collaborative, that we are throwing all these ideas at the wall and trying to figure out which ones that stick. In order to get through that, radical empathy's got to play a huge role in those exercises, in that process.
Yeah, Howie, I love that. And I love you mentioning Adam Grant and kind of pretending to be scientists. Eric Ries wrote a book called the lean startup. And a big part of it is that in startups, but we're all kind of startups right now, because the big part about a startup that's true is that you don't know what you know and what you don't know, because there's too much uncertainty, and there's so much uncertainty for us right now. And if radical empathy is actively striving to cognitively and emotionally kind of feel with and understand where people are coming from, but the world is so uncertain, and what we used to be pretty good at understanding where our parents and caregivers and kids were coming from. We could probably all do better to like interact with them and learn more about them. We used to be pretty good at it. Now every family is navigating this pandemic differently. We have so little understanding of what's going on, and all these kids are going to get dropped into camp, and they're going to have just spent a year not really in the same boat, but in sort of the same kind of like weird ocean. So how do we go out, and in the lean startup methodology, the idea is, how do you test what's going on? How do you build a minimum viable product so that you can learn something instead of, so what can we do right now to learn something about what our families are going through, what they really want, what the kids want, what the staff want, so that we can build this radical empathy for them to be able to design a program that is going to be successful this summer based on where they're coming from, right? So I love that, and I think we can do that, and it starts with just picking up the phone. Just call, like between now and summer, let's call every single family that's going to come to camp. Let's call every single staff member 3 or 4 times maybe. And that's like a lot of work. I get it. We're busy, but like it's going to matter. And it's going to matter that I hate doing this. I personally, we just filled out like a form for our staff, all of our year-round staff, ranking like what are some of there's like 4 tasks. And it was like, which one would you like to do first? It was like make an Instagram post, organize a spreadsheet, call a parent, interview a potential staff member, I think was the 4. And my number 4 on my list was call a parent. And it's not usually in my job description for the way I run camp, like the way we run camp, to do most of the parent communication. Laura does that. And she's awesome at it. She's better at it than me. Parents like her more than me. All of that makes sense. And I'm the person that designs our systems. I'm the one that like changes our schedule. We change our schedule together, but I'm the one that kind of like pushes that forward. I need to call parents and hear what's going on with them and what's going on with their kids, because that like human-centered design is going to be a part of what we then do this summer. And if Laura talks to parents, that's great. But then Laura is the filter. Like the parents are talking, the caregivers are talking. Laura filters that information with whatever her own biases are, and then gives them to me, which is like valuable. Don't get me wrong. But how can I go directly to parents and not have that filter, and not that Laura's biasing in like an intentional way to say like, this, but that's just what happens anytime we play telephone like that. And so I guess I would push every one of us that kind of isn't normally a parent communicator. Let's make a list of 10, 20, 100 parents. And between now and summer, let's get on the phone and talk to each of them.
It's almost like we planned that comment, Jack, like we were a great act here, because what you're speaking to is not only what's good for your families, is also good for your business. So you saying, let's reach out, let's call, let's communicate with them. I think what I love, and I think Howie does too, is when that duality of what's best for your business is best for your camp and your people. And it's like Steve Baskin talked, that virtue cycle. So you make a decision based on what's best for your community, but then it also is best for your business. And that comes right along with that duality. So what you're speaking about, and what I really like about radical empathy, is it meets that, that way that we, Howie and I speak for both of us, Howie, but that we want to run camp. And so I think radical empathy speaks to that. It's good for our people. And it's also good for a business, which is hard for camp people to think about, like what's good for my business. But I love when they match and they mesh together. So what you're speaking about with that, does that resonate with you? I'm guessing you didn't think this is really good for my business, so this is gonna be my mission. But do you feel that as a product of radical empathy being your mission?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think we're a nonprofit. I think it's even harder for nonprofits to like admit when mission and money are are in alignment, that it's a good thing. Because it's like there's this weird Puritan work ethic, like I have to work hard for the mission, and this money's bad, and that's just not the case. Like we need everything is better when they're in the virtue cycle, like you're describing, like when the idea of radical empathy permeates throughout what we're doing. It's good for our business because it allows us to understand what's happening and then make adjustments in real time. And so I think that I love that. I'm scared as our organization gets larger and Laura and I have more and more responsibilities that are away from kind of camper and parent and staff work, interacting with those folks, that it will be harder for us to be as understanding, as radically empathetic to the people who matter the most for our camp, because now we manage a facility and our year-round team gets bigger. And so I'm reminding myself, doing a pump-up speech about calling families is really just me yelling at myself to do that, because I'm nervous about that. I know that the most valuable thing and the most mission critical thing about camps is about kids and relationships and families and relationships. And less of my job is doing that than it was 7 years ago. And that makes sense because I'm the only one that can do a number of things at our camp, and you're the only one that can do a number of things at your camp. But I'm scared that it makes radical empathy harder.
Yeah, it just sounds that you and Laura are on a path where, your partnership allows you to just stay on the ball, so to speak, right? And while these things will be challenging, and it's actually a sign of success that they will continue to be challenging, right? Like that's the thing. And like anything that we do, we just have to find the discipline to always remind ourselves what is the core of what we do. And I think at the end of the day, as camp owners, we have to go through that reminder or that exercise or that self-talk about what's most important, because the new flashy water slide is not what's important in general, I would argue, but in the times we're in, they're for sure not important. And I think we're all recognizing that. So that the concept or the commitment to radical empathy for sure. And I would imagine in your example, Jack, like even just those small moments where, as busy as you are and as important you are to the rest of the operation, even just setting aside some time to do those things, I think, is what we all have to prioritize. So, I think that the argument for it's good for business is something that I hope resonates with everyone who's listening, because I think not for profit or for profit, it's really great how you guys have sort of taken all this intel and information from your journey into this wonderfully unique approach to carving out, what it is you vision for camp at Stomping Ground. So congratulations. It's been really super insightful. And this really, Jack, leads to sort of this next phase of each of our episodes, and that is inspiration. What's inspiring us? I mean, tongue in cheek, I mean, my inspiration is radical empathy. I mean, let me just be honest here, but I am going to work harder. I am going to dig a little deeper for sure. But as our listeners know, we want to end each of our shows with something that's inspiring us right now. It could be a book, an article, a podcast, a documentary, a leadership quote, anything else that inspires us to be a better camp professional. And Kelly, as you always say, role modeling is the best, form of leadership. And I will start this time around. The Go Camp Pro Network, through all of its great newsletters and emails, shared a lot of articles and things that we're all thinking about right now. The one that I wanted to share is an online article called "How to Keep Your Cool in High Stress Situations." It was part of Harvard Business Review. And without going into a lot of detail, it's just a really good read on the fact that we're all finding ourselves in stressful moments, very unique to the circumstances we're all finding ourselves in. I thought it was a very good, well laid out read around just nice reminders of what we can do to keep our cool in all the high stress that we're all facing on a day-to-day business as we gear up for 2021. So I will definitely put the link in the show notes for all of you to take a look. I encourage you to do that. Jack, what's inspiring you these days?
Well, this podcast for one. We are about to hire 2 more year-round staff, and they're already hired. This is not an announcement about an application process or anything like that. And our team has spent the last, I'm actually missing a meeting right now for it, but the last week kind of developing the onboarding. What does it look like to bring folks on? Our team has been just like basically Laura and I's best friends. And so how do we bring people on and kind of illuminate for them the hidden curriculum of what happens at camp? What's the unwritten rules for what's going on? What will your actual jobs be? How do we build the community? All that stuff. Y'all have probably already done this a lot better than we will. But we're trying this kind of like process of like an Agile Sprint. So if you Google Agile Sprint, and I put the links in the show note for a definition of this, but the idea is that we blocked out a full week of our calendar as much as possible, except for things like this, and we split up a bunch of tasks and worked on small different teams to build the whole shippable product that will be the onboarding process. And we all worked together. It forced us to kind of stop and do some things. So it's been inspiring in many ways because it's kind of like going to a conference where you have to stop. You can't keep up with all your emails as much. You can't do all these things, and you have to bump into each other and talk about things. Or like staff orientation where there's so much going on, and we're mostly virtual. We're in 3 different locations right now, so it's a lot of Zoom time and phone calls and things like that. But I think we're going to try another Agile Sprint, or we're calling it, and Matt, you might have to beep this out, but we're calling it a getting shit done week, where we're not working on other projects. There's no, other stuff is pushed to the side to get shit done this week. And we're going to do the same for the program for this summer. We've been kind of doing a bunch of little things here and there to try and like keep an eye on what the program will look like this summer. But in March, we're going to just stop for a week and only do that, push everything off our calendars. And I just read the book that inspired this, because Kelly, I know you always want the book. The book that inspired this is called Doing Agile Right. And it's written by some folks at some big consulting company or something. And it's mostly not applicable to camp, but I liked it.
I like it.
Amazing. Great stuff.
Add another book to my nightstand. I literally am worried about my nightstand's integrity because I have 2 piles. And my kids keep saying, Mom, you don't need any more books. I'm like, don't ever say that again. That's like a bad word in my house. Blasphemy, children. I'm going to talk about a book, shocker, but this time it's not an educational book. It's a work of fiction, but right now it's speaking to me. It's Kristen Hanna's new book called The 4 Winds, and it's historical fiction, which I love immensely. And it takes place around the Great Depression and down in Texas, the Dust Bowls, and all the families that fled to California, the land of milk and honey, and how the tenacity of those families right now is speaking to me that, yes, this is hard. And what we've been through is hard in many different levels, but it feels like when I read that, it's nothing compared to what those people had to do to survive. So it's giving me some much needed perspective and just, wow, some admiration for some really brave, strong people during that time. So that's my little inspiration right now. As we leave the show, it's important for people to know how to get a hold of us, especially Jack. I think people are going to be really inspired after listening to you. So what is the best way for people to communicate with you after this show?
You can email me at jack@campstompingground.org, and we're on all like the social media stuff to keep an eye on us on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and whatever else. We're not very active on TikTok yet. Hopefully this summer is going to change that. But coming.
We all have that on our to-do list, don't we? How can people get a hold of you?
Yes, TikTok is on my to-do list, Kelly. Howie at camprobinhood.ca is the way to get a hold of me. Howie Grossinger on social media. Feel free to connect. Love to talk camp. So that's how you can get a hold of me.
Awesome. And you can reach me through my email, Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com. Please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned this episode and lots of good stuff there from our show and other Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. We hope you enjoyed this. Jack, thank you so much for your time today. That was absolutely amazing and inspiring. Howie and I learned so much, not only about you, but about radical empathy and how as camp owners, that is something that we can bring to our own camps. So thank you for listening, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.